I want to know, what's the strangest thing you have in your house?
Yeah, hold on a sec. So this is actually something that my wife desperately felt she needed, and I absolutely agree. And it's a box of teeth.
This is Box of Teeth, chewing over the stories behind the books, with our guest Willy Vlautin.
Hello, welcome, Willy Vlautin. Thank you for joining me on Box of Teeth. And where am I speaking to you from today?
Portland, Oregon.
Fantastic. Well, it's great to have you here. Listen, I want to talk straight away about your characters. And In the Night Always Comes, much like many of your books, we kind of greet a character who is pretty much at her lowest ebb. And I just wondered if you're drawn to writing about people in those crisis moments, those most challenging moments, because it's a theme that seems to occur quite a lot in your novels.
I mean, I think from when I started writing stories as a kid, I've always been writing about beat up people. I think just because I've been hanging on by a thread, it feels like most of my life. And so I am drawn to those kind of characters.
And with Lynette, she's such an incredibly tenacious character. There, you know, she's still sympathetic, despite the fact that we find out pretty early on she's been pretty mean to a lot of people, and she's had tough things happen to her, but it's gone both ways. Is it difficult as a writer to make the reader still kind of gun for their character like that? And is it important to you that the reader does?
Well, I mean, I think you want the reader to if you're going to spend 200 pages with somebody, or if I'm going to spend 3 years with somebody, I gotta be behind them. Yeah. Life's too short. I don't want to be around a serial killer or study a sociopath. It doesn't interest me at all.
Yeah.
With Lynette, I was interested in powerlessness. I mean, I think she's been rough to people because I think that's her only defense mechanism. Yeah. And so I think when you meet her, she's really beat up, and her only way of coping when somebody takes control of her or tries to take control of her is she gets really pissed off. And I'm always interested in power versus powerlessness, yeah. The have and the have-nots, and this novel is really about the have versus the have-nots.
You mentioned there the idea of a character sticking with you for 3 years for you as a writer. This book it's a very short space of time. We're riding with Lynette like for a whole chunk of it through one night. Did there any of that infect the writing, or was it exactly the same process as your other books, which might be set over a longer time?
I mean, it was more fun in that regard because it was more, so much of it's about, and it's happening all over the world, but especially in the United States and the bigger cities, that their housing prices are going up so fast and they're changing so fast. Like Portland is changing like weekly. It feels like that it's changing, and housing prices have gone up almost 5 times where wages have only gone up twice. And there's homeless camps in Portland now, and all in a roughly 5 to 10 year time. So it felt really rushed and panic. It feels like something's going on, and if you don't figure it out and make more money, then you're going to get left behind. And so I wanted the novel to have that kind of speed to it. So that part was fun, but like I do with every novel, I took a wrong left turn, and right. I spent 1.5 years on a part that I ended up cutting. So I do that a lot. Like I feel like I'm always going pretty good on a novel, and then I take a bad turn in Albuquerque kind of thing, and and then I'm out in the woods for a fucking year, trying to get back.
And is that a pretty painful process to figuring that out? I mean, I guess it is.
Well, it's just like being in a bad relationship where you wake up one morning and you're like, oh, it is really unfixable. Right. And then you call your brother and you get drunk for a week, and you're like, you think you're a loser, and then you cut ties with it, and then you move on.
Listen, I heard that you and your band have written a soundtrack to this album. Is that right? As you did for Don't Skip Out on Me. And I just wondered about how that process works.
I wasn't even thinking about it as music. And then Corey Gray, the keyboard player, we were recording our new record, like our full length, which we've been working on for the last couple of years. And he brought in a trumpet instrumental. And I love the song. I mean, I just fell in love with it. From the second he finished it, I was like, man, that has to be on the record. And I go, what's the name of it? And he goes, I don't have a name for it. And I said, well, Dad, I'm working on this book. Night Always Comes. I just finished it. I said, that's Lynette's song, man. I mean, that feels exactly like her. And so he let me name it. And I called it Lynette's Lament. And then after that, he and I just, like, I wrote a bunch of songs kind of in that world, and he wrote a bunch of songs. And we put this, then the soundtrack, we just said, oh, let's just do a soundtrack too, because it just felt right at that moment. So it was interesting. It was the first time I was so inspired by his beautiful tune that we created this whole world around it.
Wow, that's an incredible way for it to happen. I mean, and normally do you think of books or prose and music as the boundaries between those being fluid?
I mean, most of my novels, except for The Night Always Comes, started as songs. You know, I'll write a song, and if the story sticks with me after the song's done, then I know there's something there. Yeah. So for like Don't Skip Out on Me started as a song called Don't Skip Out on Me. And I had the idea of the story, and then it just kind of kept morphing. So yeah, they're all married, you know, they all kind of start as one thing and end as another. So when I first started writing decent songs was when I started writing short stories as a kid.
Liz, I want to ask a bit about your kind of writing process and the place you write. Where do you do your writing? Are you at your desk right now? Is that where you write?
So I rent this office in this old working class part of Portland called St. John's, and I like out my window is an old man bar that opens at 7 in the morning, and then an old movie theater. So it's pretty amazing.
And listen, I can see behind you, you've got a great Irish band, the Pogues poster. You've got what looks like a very kind of stylized image of a railroad. What else have you got in your office? What's the weirdest thing in your office?
Well, I bought this old desk, like a 1920s desk from a guy that sold them out of his garage. He sold furniture, and it was pretty beat up. It was from a place called the Hamilton Hotel. And I bought it for one reason, and I'll show you right now. But right there, what you're seeing is some kid drew Slayer or carved Slayer into this beautiful desk. And he put his, because he's a dumbass, and he probably put his initials right there, yeah, you know? So there you can see them all. Jesus, man. And you're like only a guy that likes Slayer would put his initials after he carved it. But I like Slayer, and I just, it made me laugh so hard because that's such a dumbass kid thing to do that I had to buy it.
That is brilliant that he put his badge right on there. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Listen, I was looking at your books, the physical books, and you had this amazing quote from Ursula Le Guin, who's a complete legend, and gave this really thoughtful quote talking about what you do. And I just, how do you feel about, what do you think about this idea that it's interesting that there are thriller writers, writers known for fantasy, literary fiction writers all coming together and talking about your books in that way?
I mean, anytime anything good happens to my books, I'm so grateful, In Ursula Le Guin's case, she's from Portland, but she was the smartest person in any room. When you walked into a room and she was there, and I met her a handful of times, like the whole place would quiet down. Really? Everyone would know what she said. Yeah, she was really breathtakingly intelligent. The things that she would say just in an idle conversation were always, you're like, amazing. So you're like sucking in your gut. You're telling yourself, don't swear, and just listen to her. And she was always, and she drank whiskey too. I mean, she was not like, you couldn't really peg her as anybody but like a force of nature. So I admired her more than anything. So that meant a lot, that she would read my book and that she liked it meant a lot, because I mean, man, I'm a janitor compared to her,
I had a home. I have the DeLines album, The Imperial, and I have with the beautiful cover, the motel and the car. And I was lucky when I was in my early 20s, I drove, it's not quite the car that's on the cover, but it's pretty close. I drove a very dilapidated 1979 Cadillac all around America. And I stayed in a lot of motels. I had no money, and I felt like I was living in, all my favorite movies. And then I kind of got to thinking about that image, and I got to thinking about Motel Life, your novel, and how the very first page features some kind of duck, as I think the character says, flying through the window of the motel and landing on the floor. And I wondered if you could tell me, what's your favorite motel, or what's the most petrifying motel you've ever stayed in, or any kind of motel story to finish us off.
Well, growing up in Reno where I did, there was literally 100 motels, mom and pop motels in like a mile radius. And I think I got obsessed with them as a kid because I didn't like living where I was living. And I knew that if you lived in a motel that they had a TV and the hot water and worked, and they had a bed and a dresser. So all you had to do was come up with money and you could have a home.
Yeah.
So I think as a little kid, I just obsessed with them because they had the beautiful signs in their mini homes.
Yeah.
So I just dreamed about them as escape. So I guess there was a motel I used to stay in. Well, there's two. The one called the Stardust in Reno. They just tore it down, and it was really fun. It was run by this old lady, and she was really, really nice and had a beautiful sign. And it was a little more upper crust, meaning like you didn't feel like you were going to get fucking killed.
Yeah.
But the best place I ever stayed in was called the River House Motel, and it was in Reno. And I used to stay in motels a lot just for fun, or old girlfriend when I was a kid, and I would stay in motels. But this one was it was like where Frank Sinatra would stay, and all these fancy guys would stay. But then they built the casino hotels, and in all these fancy little motels, no one would stay in them anymore. But for some reason, the River House stuck around for maybe 20 years after its heyday. Yeah. And it was all Chinese Art Deco, balconies that overlooked the river. And then they had these walk-in shower, rooms kind of thing. I mean, it was exquisite, and it was beat up as hell.
Yeah.
And it maybe got torn down 5 to 10 years after I was staying there a lot. Yeah. But it was really cheap, and no one stayed there because everybody was scared of motels. And the the couple that owned it, they didn't let weeklies. You had to stay there only one night, or for a week as a vacationer, but they wouldn't let resident hotels. But man, it was the most beautiful place, and I dream about that place at least once a month. I have a dream about it, and I think about it probably every 3 days, wishing I could live there. It was the fucking most beautiful beat up place I've ever stayed in my life. So those are the good ones. The bad ones are like everybody else, like, drunk guys beating on your door in the middle of the night, thinking that you're staying in their room, or they think you're in there with their wife, and you're like, Jesus, man, you're on the wrong floor, man. Or so I've stayed in all those kind of creepy ones, but I blocked that shit out. Yeah. But where you should stay? You should go back if you ever get down to Arizona. There's a place called Gadsden Hotel in Douglas, Arizona. It's like a David Lynch hotel. It's the most gorgeous, like somebody back in the 20s, I think, blew a ton of dough on it. And so it's a very ornate, gorgeous old hotel that's like a weekly place, and no one stays there. And it's a kind of an odd town, a border town. And it's amazing, man. You got to stay there.
Okay. Yeah. All right. It's on the itinerary next time when we can finally go places again. Listen, thanks so much for spending time talking to us. I really hope that one day we can get you over to the bookshop here in Bath, and get you to maybe play some songs and definitely talk about the books in more detail. Thank you.
Cool, man.
Run, kangaroo, oh, chin, chin, run, 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 kangaroo, oh, chin, chin.